Hi, this is your host Apni Bharti and welcome to another episode of TFiR Let's Talk. And today we have with us Luke Wignall, Director of Technical Marketing at NVIDIA. Luke, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We used to say, hey, the software is eating the world. We live in a cloud-centric world. Then we are like a data-driven world. But I also feel that we are kind of also living in a world which is driven by AI, ML. Because no matter what, if you look at, of course, Tesla cars or a small, sensor that is in my every device is collecting some form of data on us. But the data itself has no value unless until you do some analytics on it or extract some value out of it. So first of all, let's start here with what role is AI ML playing in today's world?
That's the big question, right? I think there's, I think the thing I struggle most with answering that question is there's this perception that that it should have already solved all of our problems, right? It's a magical thing, right? AI. And the challenge we have, and I think you just touched on it, is everything's providing data, but we're currently late. We limit the flow of that data, the sources, right? The velocity, the retention of it, based on the value of that data. And I think the challenge is that ML, that AI, that just data science in general, has opened an unbelievably vast world of data exploration. And so the challenge is people are just now waking up to just how many questions they can ask of it, and the data is suddenly going from not valueless. It just feels like we've been collecting data for a long time because we didn't know what to do with it. Now all of a sudden we could do an amazing amount with it, and that shift happened not overnight, but incredibly fast, right? And so now all of a sudden we're collecting as much data as we can possibly get our hands on to figure out what to do with that. And so the pace is just ramped up dramatically. And that's, I think if we look at where we were even 6 months ago, but a year, 2 years ago in terms of ML as a concept versus where we are today with AI and data science, the improvements are just vast. And people are putting huge demands on make it easier, make it faster, make it more accessible, put it where I can get to the tools quickly, where my data is, and I want to be able to learn, I want to be able to explore and extract value out of that data as fast as possible and iterate, right? Not just stop with one question, but take that question and make it form more questions, right? And explore.
The scope is so wide, but let's just kind of become more realistic. If I ask you, because you work closely with businesses, what are some of the business problems or business challenges that companies are trying to solve through the help of AI? So as I said, as we were discussing that, there are so many areas but what are the realistic problems that they are actually solving today, where they are actually leveraging AI, and you folks are helping them? So let's look at the real problem they're trying to solve.
The example I just used, we have multiple, data, networking, cell, whatever, internet providers that are looking to solve their problems. But that same problem is the same that you have with anything where logistics are involved. So if it's retail, getting the right product in the right place at the right time, keeping in mind, this isn't as simple as I ordered something and I want it here as soon as possible. We're talking about analytics and predictive analytics. So being able to predict what Luke's going to want and get that product nearby before I even order it, right? Those are, getting to a point where we're able to provide and deliver, whatever that service or product might be. I mean, customers have come accustomed to that, and frankly, businesses want to be able to figure out how to do it faster, better, more, they could be more efficient. There's cost savings involved. I mean, all we're doing right now is talking about whether it's recommender systems and then resulting predictive analytics around inventory and so forth. Could be safety. We're working on multiple projects with people, with organizations that are looking at various safety factors, whether it be manufacturing and was the right part selected by that industrial robot? Did it thread in appropriately? Is the assembly done and safe? If you think about it, take an entire assembly line of robots. I was talking to a car manufacturer that has 10 different buildings with multiple cells of multiple robots in every building. How is a human being or multiple human beings supposed to watch all that video feed and make sure that everything is done correctly and the end result, an automobile, is well assembled and safe for that operator who eventually owns it, correct? That stream of data, no human can stare at all that and capture it all and assess it. I can take that same logic and apply it to healthcare. how can any doctor, to use the analogy that, your doctor is at their best when, she or he is at the end of their career and they've seen the most, right? But that's now they're at the end of their career, right? A healthcare AI doesn't sleep, doesn't close its eyes, it doesn't forget, it's learning constantly, and it can learn at computer speeds. So it doesn't take a lifetime to build up a body of understanding of what to look for. And I can take that story and apply it to any of these others that I'm giving you. Like all of these are real challenges being solved today.
As much as when you look at some of these use cases or examples that you gave there, as exciting it looks like, there's one more big problem that is going on. There is a shortage of tech talent already, and then finding data scientists or folks who are well versed with all these technologies even harder, which also means that the challenges that IT teams do face to once again extract value out of these. I mean, there are, when you talk about healthcare, big organizations, they do have a lot of resources. They take all the data sciences that are available in there, but not everybody can afford that. So can you also talk about
Yep.
what are the frictions that are there between the IT teams and AI ML professionals there, or just in general the organization, they feed this crunch that, hey, you know what, we want to leverage it but we can't.
In fact, I would add another facet to your question and say it's easy to talk about the big names, right? The huge online retailer or the major auto manufacturer or whoever. But what about the, I don't know, the 12 store convenience chain in middle America, or the small beverage distributor in Europe, or pick your mid market. Where are they supposed to get the ability to take advantage of all of this, right? How do we, and I, made this joke before, and I'll make it again and every time I have to use it, but democratization of AI, right? How do we bring it to the masses? How do we make it accessible? And so NVIDIA AI Enterprise, for example, which we just launched or are launching 2.1, the whole point of these structures, that Tau toolkit and so many other aspects of what we're building in software. This is right now, I'm not talking about the hardware conversation. I'm talking about the software conversation. And I'm saying that the tool sets that we're putting together are designed to begin taking what was extremely complex, developer-centric steps in an entire AI practice and turning those into well-formed, software being delivered that is leverageable, usable, frankly, at low code levels by, people with, general IT skill sets, with general development skill sets. So if we can bring the bar down and open it up to a much larger skill set base without having such specific necessary skill sets, then anybody can become, a data explorer, right? And begin to solve some of these problems. And that's really been NVIDIA's focus now for some time, is lowering the bar, making this accessible. And NVIDIA AI Enterprise was a huge investment on our part to help solve that. We also have Launchpad, for example, and this gets back to another problem in that it's not just the data scientists or the AI practitioners that we're worried about solving for. There's also the IT, right? The core data center IT professionals that are having to deliver some sort of work environment for those AI practitioners to work on. And right now, those goals are out of alignment, right? The IT person's looking for 3 to 5 years of hardware stability and what have you. There's the AI practitioner, on the other hand, is just saying, give me flexibility, give me the software I need, give me the tools I need now. I just want to get to work. And that's out of alignment, right? You've got, stable and consistent. You've got demand for flexibility and iteration and exploration. Getting those two at the table and getting them to understand that AI ought to be and is with NVIDIA AI Enterprise especially, easy to deploy, easy to use, and then back to IT, easy to support, which I think is something that gets forgotten, right? It gets brushed aside. It's like, okay, we got it installed. Well, that's great, but how do you adjust? How do you right size? How do you size up? How do you size down? How do you deliver the right resources at the right time to the right people to get the job done?
Right, and that's, I think, is more or less like a day-to operations where you got things started, but once again, manage it, maintain it, update it, and you may need to add new feature and functionality. As good as it is to lower the bar by making things more accessible, but there are still a lot of tech jargons and some understanding. You do need to know to be able to leverage no matter which platform it is. So can you also talk about either it could be cultural or technological, that how organizations can kind of prepare their teams for AI as well? It's more or less like upskilling them. Where we do know that there is already a resource crunch, so that's also becomes a big challenge that you're asking folks to learn something new when they can just go and do something else somewhere else.
I would argue one of the more powerful things that we've brought to the table for customers in the last year is Launchpad. And uh, at its core, Launchpad is nothing more than an instantaneous POC environment. But if we go back to my comment about, you've got IT people that are struggling to figure out how to support some of, in fact, a customer gave me some data points on this and said that AI practitioners are 3 to 5 times more demanding than any other user they take care of. I expected maybe a 2x, something along those lines, but 3 to 5 was to the point where they expressed real concern and said, we said, hey, we'll help you with a POC, and I'll get to Launchpad in a second and how we enabled that for them. But they were immediately like, no, 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 do not open that door. We are not ready to support a large quantity of those users on multiple platforms. Like that is just out of the question. And so we knew right then that we had to solve for, can we give them a safe environment where they can meet their AI practitioners, where their IT people can skill up, working closely with AI practitioners to deliver a truly functional production-like, or actually production environment for them to practice on, to try and use these platforms to figure it out, and then the IT people to be able to support and adjust and size appropriately. And we built Launchpad. Launchpad it's a service, arguably. It's working closely with Equinix. We've built a fully production environment in 9 global regions and hundreds of nodes. And you can basically, as a customer or as a partner, bring a customer into that environment, bring both and this gets directly to your question, bring both their IT as well as AI practitioners in, and we can deliver a wide variety of labs that are both IT focused to guide them how to build, deploy, and support, as well as AI practitioners can come in and do the things like to your previous question about what are some of the examples. We've captured those in labs. You can build support bots. You can do, vision training, object identification, fraud detection. It's a long list. And the goal of that is, again, to create, it's not a lab, right? We didn't want to deliver a canned experience. The goal was, if we can bring both parties to the table, get them to understand that they're in this together and can work together and can deliver this together, and give them a stable production-like environment to do it on in the form of Launchpad, I feel like we're breaking as many hurdles down as we possibly can. Right, and give it. And this isn't a size thing. It's not like you have to be some huge company. An individual could come in and go through this experience. Some Midwestern small bank chain could come in and work on this. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a Fortune 5 or even a Fortune 500. It's really designed to be, again, that any person's environment to come in and do an instantaneous POC with AI.
Can I also ask you that while you do have these resources available for users, what advice you have for businesses, so that first of all they have kind of, it's interesting that we are talking about that, because we talk about the whole DevOps culture, cultural shift where you are looking at operations and developers, but here, so that they have this culture where they do look at AI from a full stack perspective. At the same time, they do understand that, hey, this is going to be critical part of their IT infrastructure, so as to prepare them culturally for their AI journey, which is not going to be separate from the rest of the IT infrastructure going forward in 5 to 10 years.
That's a big point. That's a very, very important point here, is that everything I'm talking about is core. It's core data center. It's not the cluster of, the supercluster that's in the corner of the data center or in its own special building. Those clusters are doing incredible work, right? They're doing some of the largest problems with the largest data sets. But when you talk to those teams, invariably, one of the problems they have is, and I heard this all last year, literally 12 straight months of speaking to Lighthouse accounts and asking them what challenges they had, how could we help them, how could we solve the very questions that you're asking me. And ironically, if you talk to the cluster teams, their response invariably, uniformly, was we're good, but if you, because keep in mind, they've been doing this for a while, we're good, but if you could help all of the little, you know, projects that keep coming to us, the sea of data explorers, people that are just, these are data, they're not capital D, capital S data scientists. These are little d, little s, right? These are data analysts, these are business intelligence analysts, these are, the list just goes on and on and on, and they're not under the umbrella of data scientists with, as capital letters. These are everybody else who touches data. And these cluster owners are like, we have this huge queue of big problems to solve. Could you just go give something to all those people so they, get core IT in a position to be able to take care of them? We heard this over and over again. And that, if you think about it, that boils down to IT being able to deliver a POC, AI, and especially not dyed in the wool, long-standing data scientists or AI practitioners. These are new players to the field, and if we can give them tools, software that enable them to get up to speed very quickly, very easily, without extensive training, then we've really broken down all the barriers to help these companies get engaged quickly, right? And what we're finding is as they do this, like I said, the floodgates open, right? It goes from 1 to 2 to 4 to, it just continues to exponentially explode as they realize now we should be retaining more data. I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning of our conversation. I wish we had more data from the past, but we're going to start collecting it now. We're going to start asking more questions of it. We're going to get more people involved, and we're going to invest more in this infrastructure, and that's software and hardware, in order to be able to explore more, gain more knowledge, and provide more improvements to whatever our org's trying to accomplish, right? And that, I think, that's the promise that we've been working towards, right? There's lots of fancy things that AI, I think, a lot of really cool stuff that's coming out of AI, but there's also just some really nice, simple things like, support bots that are actually effective and useful and intelligent and have far better ability to understand intent, customer emotion. There's just, it doesn't always have to be about the cure for some big thing, right? It could sometimes just be making all of our lives a little bit easier. And that happens when the rest of the process, whether it's MLOps, DevOps, you name it, is easier, right? That's an enablement. And that's what we're trying to do here.
When you talk about data center, we are also seeing the evolution of 5G private network and edge computing. The edge is not about necessarily a tiny sensor society. It's about data center at remote places or near users. And that's where the challenge is, that you cannot send everything back and forth to the cloud. So a lot of decisions have to be made at the edge itself. So can you also talk about how do you look at this space? And once again, how are you making it easier for a company? Because another challenge with edge data centers is that you cannot send your team out there. It could be on top of a mountain, on top of a tree, on a remote place. So talk about that, please, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, it makes perfect sense. In fact, we have a well-established product called Fleet Command. To sum it up in a sentence, it would be, how can I overly simplify the ability to drop, whether hardened or just as you said, in a micro data center, in a closet at a retail location. Doesn't always have to be in some toxic environment like the top of a telephone pole or whatever. But how can I take those devices, ship them out, and have any person be able to take it out of the box, plug in the right cables, and walk away, because that's all they had to do. Meanwhile, remotely, the core data center people are being able to bring that device online securely, and once it's online, manage it, drop in the right containers, and bring that up very quickly. That's Fleet Command, and that's in play. We've had that out for quite some time now, and it's because, and one of the reasons it was one of the first is, at the end of this process, as we work through the entire workflow, if we don't get to the point where you can actually deliver it to the edge where it can do some work, all we've done is create an experiment, right? It has to, at the end of the day, all the things we've talked about actually have to attach to the edge and begin either collecting more data, inferencing on that data, making decisions on that data. That's really where the rubber meets the road, right? That's the part that matters. And that edge, It could be at the top of a mountain. It could be, as you said, at the top of a telephone pole, but it could also be within the data center, and that's just where all of the data ends up anyway. So the edge is a the edge is a cloudy place, right? Oddly, and it is honestly the most important part because it's where the results happen. And it's also, and I think this gets overlooked a bit, um, as we talked about data at the very beginning of this. Um, the data collection happens there as well. And so, and you made the point of you can't pull all that data back to the core. So things like federated learning, the ability to not only inference but also train at the edge, putting that kind of horsepower. It's not as simple as a small sensor, right? There's also the ability to have horsepower at the edge. NVIDIA builds many solutions around this to enable horsepower at any point in this journey. So it could be at the core, it could be at the edge, it could be near edge, could be somewhere in the middle. This could be health clinics scattered around the world, right? And we want to be able to train against that local data, but then take anonymized learning out of that so that it's not tied to the individuals. And that healthcare data then gets pooled again, and iterated on all the way until we have a much more intelligent core data set and or training set that gives us far greater accuracy around healthcare, as one example. But the same thing could be said for anything: logistics, safety, traffic. The list just goes on and on and on.
Look, thank you so much for taking your time out today, and of course, talk about not only what NVIDIA is doing to help customers with their AI challenges, but also more importantly, that what role AI is playing in today's world, and also talk about some specific use cases that are there, and how, once again, the biggest challenge is the tech talent gap that you folks are doing with Launchpad on us to lower the barrier of entry to help teams upskill and be ready for AI ML. So thanks for sharing all those insights, and I would love to have you back on the show. Thank you.
I really appreciate the time. To me, this is the most exciting frontier we have. So let's go explore. Thanks.